right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Rick and Danny Show. Hi, Rick.
Morning, Danny, or afternoon. How are you?
Doing well. It's Masters Friday. Brenna, you feeling okay?
Living the dream.
Living the dream.
I apologize in advance. I'm going to be half into this one. It is Masters Friday, as you said, so it is a national holiday.
At least he's honest.
For sure, for sure.
There's a lot of things you can say about me, and you have, Brenna, but honesty at least is one of them.
A lot of crap talking for sure.
It's one of those days where distractions at work they're expected today, Got to keep up with the master scoreboard.
We support you, Rick.
How to do it?
Well, no better time than to plug our research department, Rick. We have a thriving research department at CSNF. You and I are both a part of that team.
Yeah, I will say it's definitely led by you guys on the medical oncology side and the drug companies, but radiation and radioligand therapy definitely plays a small role. But yeah, it's been a treat to be a part of the team and learn a lot of additional perspective from what you guys look at when you're getting trials, screening patients for trials, and trying to determine which trials actually make sense to enroll in a multi-center community program like we have.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, since we joined the practice, I think our research program has grown substantially. We've opened many, many new trials, some of which have been a part of, multiple international, sites that really came through and was studying a drug that got approved based on really good data and drugs that we use in clinic every day. So we wanted to plug a few research studies that were really important that we're enrolling currently at CSNF. And I thought that I'd highlight some of the lung cancer trials that we have open right now. I'm a part of a couple trials, the primary investigator on two trials for non-small cell lung cancer, and then one other research trial in lung cancer. The Summit trials, so Summit Therapeutics, they have a new compound. It's actually a bispecific antibody that targets both a immunotherapy target called PD-1 and it targets another protein called VEGF. And this is a monoclonal antibody that's targeting both of those protein receptors and has shown a lot of promise in non-small cell lung cancer. And we've been fortunate enough to open both of the trials here at our institution, and we have the ability to enroll patients at any of our sites. Both trials are investigating this new compound. One of them combines it with chemotherapy, which is something we offer patients as a standard of care for newly diagnosed non-small cell lung cancer with metastases. And then the other trial is just looking at that bispecific antibody as a monotherapy. So it's not in addition to any other therapy. You're studying it to see how effective it is giving it alone. And the comparator arm, these are both phase 3 trials, so they're compared to the standard of care. So patients are not getting an alternative investigational agent, they're getting standard of care treatment. And the standard of care on both of these arms is an immunotherapy, Keytruda, and then one of them they're receiving chemotherapy, and the other trial you're receiving just the Keytruda, which is a standard of care chemotherapy or immunotherapy for non-small cell lung cancer. We started to enroll on both trials. We are actively recruiting patients for both studies. We, are working with pulmonologists around the city and working with our primary care folks. And we wanted to plug these two trials in studying in lung cancer and really let people know that these are great opportunities to get patients on the most, or actually the newest investigational agents that may be game changers in the future here for non-small cell lung cancer.
That's pretty cool that, we have these kind of cutting edge trials in a community setting. And I think a big credit goes to not just the research committee, but everyone involved in the research department, the clinical trial coordinators, our regulatory staff. I think it's just pretty impressive, the machine here, and being able to operate to patients at locations close to where they live, even if some of them require the occasional first visit or some visits to other practices. A lot of these trials can be done where they don't have to travel far to major academic centers or travel, hours on end.
Yeah, most of our trials are industry sponsored, so they're going to be sponsored by some pharmaceutical company or biotech company. And most of them are phase 2 and phase 3 trials. And we talked about that on previous episodes about what a phase 2 trial, phase 3 trial is. But just to let patients know again what that means, a phase 2 trial is going to be really investigating a compound, a new drug for efficacy. And sometimes there is a comparator arm on phase 2 trials where it's being compared to another drug that has efficacy in whatever disease it's being studied in. Sometimes it's given alone, so you have these single arm trials where everyone gets the investigational drug, and then we're looking at how effective that drug is in their particular disease. And then phase 3 trials are always going to be usually compared to the standard of care, and that is variable depending on what cancer you're treating, what disease you're treating. So for lung cancer, as I said, the standard of care for a lot of folks is either receiving immunotherapy plus or minus chemotherapy. And some patients have mutations that specify a different type of therapy. But in a phase 3 trial, you're going to get an investigational drug, and then it's going to be compared to the standard of care. So we usually advise patients not to be, afraid or feel like they're getting some drug that has no, you know, no proven track record, no safety evaluation, that it's already been through that testing prior to a phase 3 trial. So safety has already been established. Efficacy has usually been established already that it's effective for their particular disease. So these are great options for patients.
Dan, your trial something that patients find kind of on their own, or how does it work? How does the process of a patient getting on a trial work?
Yeah, actually, patients can go online and go to clinicaltrials.gov, and that's a government website that you can type in if a patient has a particular cancer, a particular disease. You type in that disease, you can search for your region, or you can open it up to anywhere in the US, and it'll show you any clinical trial, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, which are actively recruiting. It'll show trials that have closed already. I usually do some research on my own if I have a patient that I feel like is eligible for a clinical trial. I'll search clinicaltrials.gov, search in this area, expand that search out if needed. And it's a really good tool. And you don't need a login, you don't need special access to get to clinicaltrials.gov. You just search and then talk to your provider about, results that you come across.
And we have all of our open clinical trials listed on our website as well by the cancer location. And those can actually be found. I just changed it. It should be able to be found by just Googling clinical trials Jacksonville. We should pop up now.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at our website to figure out which trials we have that are actively recruiting. But when we see patients, Rick and I, we're looking at the trials we have, but then we're also looking in the community, seeing what else is out there for patients. We'd love to get patients on the trials we have open and easy access to, but again, we do search around town and elsewhere if we need to for patients, because you have to do the right thing for them.
And Rick, do you guys have any trials open on the radiation front?
Well, unfortunately, in terms of radiation external beam specific trials, most of those trials are done either at the institutional level or at the cooperative group level. So, things like NRG and things like that, and most don't really allow for community centers to have them open. There tends to be very labor intensive on the physics side, and not, unfortunately, unlike the medical oncology side, there's not, a pharmacy sponsor. So it's very challenging financially, to open these trials. But we have been able to get very involved in the radioligand space. So things like lutetium dotatate, lutetium PSMA or Pluvicto. And we've had several trials open in the last few years using this drug, and has allowed us to kind of bring some of these drugs to patients even before their FDA approval. And right now we have one trial open for patients who've had prostate cancer, had either radiation or surgery, found to have a recurrence that spread to 5 or less areas in the body. And so that trial is looking at the role of targeted radiation plus or minus the addition of, the radioligand therapy. So that'll hopefully be a very interesting trial, and certainly one that, is an interesting option to patients who may want to avoid anti-testosterone therapy, which has its own, potential side effects and things with it. So it's kind of a niche, patient population that, I think, hopefully we'll see what the benefits are, but either way allows, patients another option, as opposed to the standard androgen deprivation in that setting.
Yeah, we're hoping to get more trials like that open, Rick, right? And look for.
Yeah, we're working closely, with the drug manufacturers. They're trying to open trials of different lines of therapy, so we're hopefully top of mind to, be a part of that. And I know we have a few in the pipeline, as well. There's also different, radiopharmaceutical models that, we've looked into as well. So I think hopefully with our proven track record on these trials, as well as our clinical theranostics team, I think we're going to be definitely hopefully have even more options in the future, clinical trial wise, for these patients.
Yeah. Yeah, every month we're reviewing, Rick and I and the research team are reviewing protocols for new trials to open at CSNF. So I would say we typically review 3 to 5 new trials every month.
That's right.
And there's a process that we need to go through, to get those protocols approved and open a trial at our sites. So it takes usually 2 to 3, sometimes 4 months to get a trial open, but we have a pretty good list of trials here for patients in many different types of diseases. So when patients come to see their doctor, I think it's worthwhile just asking about what we have available, because sometimes we have trials available for frontline, meaning if patients haven't had treatment yet, that they're eligible for some clinical trial, even in the frontline setting. Sometimes it's after they've been on treatment, and say they need a different treatment to be considered in the future. So definitely, I encourage patients to ask their doctors about what's available, and not just waiting until all types of treatments have been tried. That I advise patients, if there's a good trial to start with and you haven't been on treatment yet, let's consider that if it makes sense.
And so how do you guys choose which trials to do? Is it something that research committee picks, or is it kind of an agreement between you guys and the drug company and based on, what they can offer, or how does that kind of work?
All of the above. It's the committee decides, we need to have a majority vote that we agree to open up the trial, based on feasibility of the trial and how many patients we expect to enroll in it. And then there is a business side of things, making sure that it makes sense for, CSNF to open the trial, and a legal side of things too, that we have to approve having that trial open, and that it has its legal review to make sure that we can open it and you know adhere to the law. So um but yeah, I think we generally approve, I would say, between 1 and 3 trials to be new trials to open every month or two. And then it just goes through that process, I would say 2 to 4 months to open a trial. And so we constantly have trials open and closed, and the duration that the trial stays open for is variable. Sometimes it's only a year, sometimes it could be up to a few years that it's open. So we're constantly reviewing, constantly looking at what we have available and where our needs are to open up more trials.
I had another question and I've lost it.
Yeah, and all different types of trials. We have a new vaccine study that's opened up in the lung cancer space. So this is in the second or more lines of therapy that we now have a vaccine that they're investigating to see if it's effective at reducing cancer burden in non-small cell lung cancer. And I think it's nice to have trials that are not just giving, drugs that are either chemo or, have more extensive side effect profiles that we know these vaccine trials tend to have a pretty low incidence of side effects. And this particular one we have open for lung cancer is a good option for patients because the side effect profile is favorable. That probably wasn't your question, Brenna.
It's a good answer though.
It was a good answer. I think I was gonna ask, do you guys try and focus on like which disease site you pick based on patient population? Is that kind of how you, or do you just look at, you kind of already answered that with.
Yeah, patient population. I mean, there are trials that are going to be tough to recruit to. And it's all based on every trial has an inclusion and an exclusion criteria. So you got to make sure that when we're reviewing this, you look at Jacksonville, the patients we treat at our different sites, and how realistic is it to get even one patient on that trial? If it's going to be hard to recruit one patient, we're probably not opening that trial up for all of our sites. So um, I think every disease type's a little bit different. Um, the most common types of cancer tend to have more trials available. And unfortunately, like the harder to treat cancers, like I mean, even for example, pancreatic cancer, which is a difficult cancer to treat when it's metastasized. Um, I would love to have as many trials as we have open for non-small cell lung cancer, for pancreatic cancer, but we just don't. They don't have quite as many available to patients. But we look for those trials because we like to have at least one option for every disease type if we could,
Yeah.
if we had our choice.
Are there some cases in which maybe a patient comes in for, I'm sure there is, having looked at Dr. Google and having, come with a list of clinical trials and the answer is simply no, standard of care is just what's best for this, or do you run into that often, or?
Um, so what I do now is I look at what trials are available and do I feel like that option is better than the standard of care or not when I look at our clinical trial list. And even going beyond what we have available and looking at what's in the area. Yeah, there are certain times where, I'll go back to lung cancer. There's very clear guidelines on what to use for non-small cell lung cancer, depending on a patient's mutation status, the stage of disease, et cetera, et cetera. But we have really, really good clinical trial options that I might put a patient on a trial before I put on standard of care, if the trial's right. So it depends on the trial, and we tend to make that judgment and give patients recommendations based on our opinion and our knowledge. Um, and try to tell patients, we're guiding you like we'd guide a family member guiding, our friends. So I'm not trying to encourage patients to get on trial just to do that for our benefit. It's solely based on their benefit.
Danny, I think this has been a very informative Q&A about our research department. And Rick, you had some great contributions too.
No, you don't have to lie, but thank you.
No, you did. I'm being serious.
No, we love where our research department's headed. It's just going to continue to grow, and we're offering patients great trials, great support. a great time to be at CSNF.
Well, I think the other thing too, and I think you said it, but just if you're a patient, it never hurts to just ask and say, are there any clinical trials available to me? And whether there are or aren't, it's a good question that just any cancer patient or family should be prepared to ask, and hopefully their doctor can give them a good answer one way or the other.
Well, I'm sure, Rick, you get probably told this too, or kind of this comment from patients is, I don't want to be a guinea pig, when you bring up clinical trial. And there is that kind of that false sense that clinical trials are just throwing a drug that they don't know if it's effective or safe and kind of roll the dice. But we want to assure patients that if we recommend a clinical trial, it's for their benefit. It's not trying to investigate a drug that's unsafe or not effective. It's solely based on we think they're going to benefit from it.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is, like you said, different phases have different goals. And so when you're in a
True.
phase 3 trial, you tell the patient, the drug has this proven safety record one way or the other, what that data is. And you're really going to be either may not help, it may not hurt, but you're going to be contributing to science as well and getting the standard of care in those trials. So it's sort of, some people like to look at it from an altruistic perspective too, that they're contributing for the next patient in their shoes that could be coming after them in that situation.
Danny, do you see patients looking for clinical trials more as like kind of a last ditch effort? Like, do you see patients who are higher stage diagnoses are searching for clinical trials more, like after standard of care maybe doesn't work? Or do you see more of, stage 1, 2 that are, wanting to sign up for these things, kind of piggyback off Rick, saying that,
Well,
think of science, the science behind it?
I think there are some challenges when it comes to enrolling patients with early stage cancers in clinical trials. Usually at a academic center where they have surgeons, radiation oncologists, medical oncologists together to make the decision on a clinical trial. You tend to see more enrollment in the earlier stage cancers onto these trials. We have adjuvant studies. That means studies that are done either and even neoadjuvant, which means preoperative or postoperative clinical trials that are investigating ways to reduce the risk of recurrence of a particular cancer. And the challenge to enrollment for early stage cancers is capturing the patient soon enough to talk about the trial, because some of the time, if say it's a preoperative study, a patient has breast cancer or a patient has lung cancer, and the study needs to capture that patient before they have surgery to talk to them about the trial, we would have to see the patient preoperatively to be able to enroll them. So some of the challenge for us is seeing the patient at the appropriate time to talk about the trial. So yes, those trials are available to patients with early stage cancers. Sometimes we don't see the patient in time, and the patient already had surgery and they might not be eligible for a particular trial. But we would love to, talk to patients of all stages about what options there are, because they are plentiful. They have phase 2, phase 3 trials for stage, usually stage 1 for some cancers, 2, 3, up to stage 4, which is metastatic cancer.
Good stuff.
I gotta go take care of a patient. Sorry, guys.
No,
That's
you're
okay,
good.
Rick.
Daniel, close us out on this episode.
All right, guys, thanks again for joining us. We had a great time today talking about CSNF radiation oncology, CSNF medical oncology, CSNF research department, and a little bit about the Masters Friday.
And we got to shout out our new research manager, Aaron. And we'll put some links to our research page in the show notes of this episode. If anybody wants to check it out.
Thanks, guys.